Yeah.
I believe it's time for us to begin. Some of the little chicks are still out from under. Yeah, out from under the hen's wings. Anyway, we'll start without them anyway. We're still on lesson number 1, the lawgiver, which would have been who? Moses. That's correct. And we can see that, of course, God was the one that gave the law to Moses, and then he gave the law to the children of Israel. We need to understand that Moses was quite a unique fellow. He was called the meekest man in the Bible, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes, possibly. But we can also see that he was a determined individual. We talked about his lifestyle. His life was divided into 3 40-year periods. The first 40 years was where? Remember? The land of Egypt? Correct. His second 40 years was where? He was a shepherd for his father-in-law, which would have been Jethro. And then, of course, the last 40 years of his life would have been that of leading the children of Israel to the land of promise that God had promised first off to who? Anybody remember the land promise? To Abraham. That is correct. 3 promises was made to Abraham. Anybody remember what those 3 promises was? Land. Well, actually, the land grant, and there was the people would be as the sands of the sea, and through him would be what? The coming of the Christ. So, or the saving of the world. So there was the 3 promises that God gave to Abraham many, many years before, and then we can see these things as they progressing and coming true. So Moses had a plan, I would say part of the plan that God had began to institute whenever he gave these promises to Abraham. Now, I think we got down into about question number 11. Does that seem about right to everybody? It's what I seem to have marked. I run across a statement. I want us to I want to read it and see if you will agree, and it has something to do with our lesson this morning. It says the devil will let us go today if he knows we still have interest in his kingdom. He doesn't object to our worshiping God on Sunday if we earn our wages working for him during the week. What he hates most is to see us pack up and leave him completely, and this is the thing we must do in order to please God. And we can see that Moses was an individual much like that. Because what did he say? He packed up his things and did what God commanded him to do. And it doesn't seem that he argued with God. And I know that he had made a statement, well, I'm not an eloquent man, and who am I that Pharaoh will listen to me? And of course, God told him, he said, I'll take care of that. You don't worry about it. So this is the type of individual that we're going to talk about in our continuing our study. All righty. Are there any questions that anyone might have before we get into to our study? I appreciate Brother Duran filling in for me last week. I had the opportunity to go to the congregation there at Bluff City, and I preached there on Sunday morning. We had quite a journey to come back, and we made it back safely, and we appreciate those prayers from everyone that we would make that trip safely. It was rather a hair-raising experience, we might say. We had to stop about 6 or 8 times and boom our load down. It kept coming out from under the trailer. We actually had more weight on the trailer than we should have. But anyway, good Lord watched out for us. We didn't have any accidents. Close, but no accidents. Notice there in question 11, who tried to usurp Moses' authority? Miriam and Aaron. Now, who is Miriam and Aaron? All right, these are siblings of Moses, are they not? Correct. Now, we find, first time we find Miriam is one that is watching over Moses. And where is Moses at this time? He's in the bulrushes, and he is there in that, we might say, small boat, ark, whatever you may say. And Pharaoh's daughter finds him, whether it's his actual daughter or granddaughter, regardless, it doesn't really specify. But Moses is drawn out of the water. He becomes the son of Pharaoh's daughter. And we can see that was his first 40 years of time. But notice something else. Why did they try to usurp authority over over Moses? Okay. Well, that's part of it. I believe that's true. Okay. They were little problem here with this Cushite woman that Moses had married. Anybody know who were the descendants of the Cushites? But remember, go back. Remember Noah? He had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. All righty. Anybody remember who the Cushites come from? Ham. Correct. That is correct. Very good. And notice in this chapter, if you will, chapter 12 of Numbers, verse 7 to begin with. Now, in this discussion here that Miriam and Aaron is having with Moses, and I think a little bit of jealousy there, Moses is receiving the commandments of God, is he not? God had talked to him. God had told him what to do. God had, a little bit later on, we can see the Ten Commandment law that God had given to Moses, and he gave to the children of Israel. All these things is going on. And he was getting prestige in the sense that he was leading this vast number of people. So, again, this jealousy may have come into part here. And maybe there was a little dissension even among the people that Moses was leading, because here's Miriam and here's Aaron, and they, well, we're being left out here. We might have thought that. We're kind of speculating now. They're leaving us out. We're siblings too. We're equal to Moses. We ought to be able to give some authority, or have some authority, or have some of this prestige that Moses is having. And God wasn't real pleased with that, was he? Says God's angered. Now, I've had people get angry at me before. I've had people threaten and some close calls from that standpoint, but never had that I could remember that God had said, I'm angry with you. And that's pretty serious, is it not? God's anger has been kindled. It's scary. That's exactly right. You got that right. So here is, God said, all right, we're going to paraphrase this. I'm going to set this straight. And it's kind of like the fellow said, what part did you not understand? This is what I'm going to tell you. And it's before the congregation, before the people. So there's no doubt. It's not going to be hearsay, is it? All right. Notice verse 7. My servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all my house. Who is? Moses. Notice something else, if you will. Turn to Hebrews 3 and verse 2. Here he's talking about Moses again. Hebrews 3. I think again, Paul being the writer of this great book, who was faithful to him that appointed him. Now remember, God had appointed him. God called Moses, did not? How did he call him? Remember? Burning bush, okay. He said, you are going to be my servant. You're going to be my leader. You're going to be the one that I'm looking to, that I'm going to talk to. Then he said, as also Moses was faithful in all his house, or those of his household. Okay, we understand that. No questions, is it? Now notice verse 8. With him, with who? Moses. With him I speak mouth to mouth. Remember whenever God was talking directly to God, Moses talked directly to God, where was it? Mount Sinai, receiving the 10 Commandments. We talked about that in Exodus 20. Here is God talking directly. Do we have another record of God talking directly to his people or to his creation? I gives it off. What about Adam and Eve? It says there, what is it, chapter 3, I believe it is. God is talking directly to Adam and Eve. Okay, no doubt. Notice what it says. With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently and not in dark speeches. In other words, you're going to understand what I'm telling you. There's no doubt. And the similitude of the Lord shall be, behold, wherefore then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? What gave you the right to speak against Moses? He is the one that I chose to be the leader. Now, a couple of verses I want us to think about. Deuteronomy 24 in verse 9. Deuteronomy 24, beginning actually it begins verse 8. But verse 9 is primarily the one I want to talk to. Remember what the Lord thy God did unto Miriam by the way, or in the wilderness wandering, after that ye were come forth out of Egypt. You remember what happened. The one thing that we have a tendency to do is what? Forget. He is reminding them, you remember what happened to Miriam when she spoke against Moses? This was just for how long a period of time did was she leprous? For about 3 days, was it not? I believe that's correct. Notice something else. 2 Kings 5 in verse 27. 2 Kings 5 in verse 27. This is another time lepers come in. What about leprosy? What was one of the things that leprosy did to the body? Well, I thought about it while Tom was. Yeah, all right. It is a skin problem. Literally, the skin falls off the body. So what happens, and probably Tom will talk a little bit about that, but what happens when the skin literally falls off the body? The body dies. All right. So this leprosy was a very dreaded disease to the point that the body would actually die because it has no protection. And yes. That's correct. They were taken outside of the camp, so they couldn't come in. And so this was one of the things that was taking place. And there in 2 Kings 5, we find that of Naaman, and he was a leper. And notice that God had, we could go on into it, but anyway, God had healed him of that. I was using the term as far as leprosy. So it's a very dreaded disease. And so here's this going on. Now, we have another account of some of these things as well, of people speaking against Moses. Now, we know that the dissension there is they came out of Egypt, and that there by the Red Sea, we're going to surely die. That's one thing. And we're out in the wilderness, well, we don't have food. We don't have this. We don't have that. We're surely going to die. Turn to Numbers 21. Numbers 21. We want to deal beginning with verse 5. Now, keep in mind, here's Miriam, here's Aaron. They speak against, there's dissension here. Notice verse 5. The people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in this wilderness? For there is no bread, and there's no water, and our soul loatheth this light bread. And this light bread is what we call manna. It's very, we might say non-tasting bread. Usually it was fed to the children. But this was something that they were preparing, and that was what they were eating. Notice verse 6. What takes place because of their speaking against Moses and against God? All right, here we go. The Lord anger is kindled again. The Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and many people of Israel died. So when we speak against God, does God take it lightly? Or if we blaspheme, God doesn't take it very lightly, does it? Now, that loweth there, thank you for looking at that means to have over or detached. That's right. And yet, they can furnish that for food. So, what? They were taken care of. We just didn't like the way it was presented. That's exactly what it was. So this is the thing that I'm talking about. Here is those individuals that Miriam and Aaron, they're speaking against Moses and against God. You know, you're just not doing it right, Moses. We can do a whole lot better job than you are. You ever seen anybody like that? Yeah. You just not doing it right. We know how to do it. Where did they think they were going to get this stuff? Well, they got a bunch of things before the horse. God was taking care of this situation. That's right. From the time they left Egypt all the way through. Okay. You think that they would have remembered being led out of Egypt, and as far as God giving them the manna, giving them the flesh or the birds and the water and all these. You think they would remember that? Think about it. Every time I hear the word tomorrow, I'm like, that's all good. That's true. Or we don't have this or that. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Remember who God chose to deal with is Moses. Mm-hmm. He picked him out, and Aaron knew that and should have seen what happened way back in the plagues and all the way through. Aaron was right there with him, so he could have called on too. How much? What else do you need to know? That's it. God said, He is my leader. He is the one that I'm talking to. And we can go back into chapter 12 again, and it tells us that. He brings them before the tent or the tabernacle. And here's the presence of God. This is a cloud. This is the presence of God. Remember, how did God guide the people during the daytime? By a cloud. At night, what? By a pillar of fire. So they were always in the presence of God. There's no question about that. That's exactly right. Now, here is God. He comes into their presence. And he tells them, and those that are about him, he is my chosen vessel. Listen to him. I'm talking to him. And he says, there is no other prophet but him that I'm talking to. So I don't want to hear it. You ever heard mom and dad say, I don't want to hear anymore? All right. That's what God said. I don't want to hear anymore. This is what I'm telling you.
Another thing, if you keep in mind, not just Moses, but all of the people that God used to bring things about, don't mess with his choices. Don't try to amend or fix things that he's designed and what he's doing. Don't mess with his people.
That's right. It's got.
So many times we see the people killing and mistreating and all the above of the prophets.
Oh yes. This is something been going on all this time. Now God is how had God talked to his people? Hebrews 1. God who in sundry times and in different manners in times past spoke to us by what? The fathers. This period of time that he's talking about is what? The patriarchal period, right? Through the leaders. Okay. Moses is the leader. God chose him. Someone made a statement. I'll share it with you. Those that quarrel will find fault where there is no fault to be found. I thought that's pretty cool. I think they're going to find some kind of a fault regardless if you just give them a little bit of time.
Some people like to rain on your parade.
All righty. So God's upset with Israel. And he says, this is it. I'm not having this anymore. And of course, we can see that takes place. And there's no doubt, because like I said, here is God before the people. And he's making this statement to them where there is no doubt that they can understand it. Oh, yeah. Because he made it plain enough. If somebody's talking to me out of the cloud with the voice that God's voice would. Oh, well, later on they forgot. Yeah, they forgot. In Deuteronomy, the 8th chapter in verse 15.
While you get going there, we don't need to forget that same God is looking down on us today.
Amen. Amen.
And is giving us directions to follow.
All right. Notice something there how did the people, what did the people say? Let's go back to Numbers 21. We'll go back to Deuteronomy. In Numbers 21, what did the people do? Did they change their attitude? They've been talking about Moses. Well, Moses, he's doing these bad things and he's not leading like he's supposed to. God sent fiery serpents. Now, anybody have an indication of what a fiery serpent is? Our idea of the fiery serpent is something that's burning constantly. It is an asp. This is a snake that was lived in this area, and it was a very shiny, what we'd call shiny snake. In other words, it reflected the sun, so it looked like it was on fire. And this was something that was a very deadly type of snake in this desert area. That's right. And the only way that they could be saved was what? Look, God told them after they repented, we made a terrible mistake. Have you ever made a terrible mistake and say, well, I wish I hadn't done that now? No, we do. Here's Israel, all these thousands of people saying, we made a mistake. And ask God for forgiveness. God says, I'll tell you what, Moses, you build a brass or brazen serpent, put it on a pole, and those that look upon that brazen serpent can live. If they refuse, they're going to die. Pretty plain and simple. All right. And back in Deuteronomy 8, verse 15. Who led thee through that great and terrible wilderness wherein were fiery serpents, scorpions, and drought, and where there was no water, who brought thee forth water out of the rock. Now, who's doing this? God is. God's taking care of all these things. So be careful of who you're talking about. Be careful of that because if you all by yourself, we're going to die without God. Okay. All righty. Everyone needs to realize that God is the one that's in authority. And whenever they realized it, Miriam realized it, Aaron realized it, the people realized it, their attitude changed. Yes, they forgot after a while, but they realized the power of God at that time. Okay.
And interesting too, what little research I did, that Moses was careful to give God credit.
That is very true.
He could have easily, taken all the credit.
Well, the one time that God become a little upset with Moses, did anybody remember whenever they were wanting water? All right. God said what to Moses? Speak to the rock. What did Moses do? Okay. But let's go up just a couple of verses. One of the things, Moses had become very discouraged because of the people's contention here, and they're arguing. He makes a statement. Anybody remember what that statement was? Must we fetch water? Whoa, Moses, you're not doing this. God is. But probably because of his anger that had the people, and sometimes we forget because of maybe the troubles around us, we say things that we didn't really mean at the time. But this was the reason.
He was constantly having to patch things that they had done. He was going to God on their behalf to get God to not destroy them. He was frustrated.
Okay. All right. Let's go back now to Numbers 12 and kind of wind this up. Notice, if you will, there in verse 4. This is the thing that we're talking about. The Lord spake suddenly unto Moses and unto Aaron and unto Miriam, come out from thee, you three, unto the tabernacle of the congregation. And they came out. Whenever the Lord speaks, you used to hear that old commercial. If E.F. Hutton speaks, everybody, everybody look. Here is God saying, Moses, Miriam, Aaron, I've got something to talk to you about. You're going to go. Now notice in the verse 5. And the Lord came down in the pillar of the fire cloud, as I said, stood at the door of the tabernacle, called Aaron and Moen, and they came forth. And he said, hear now. This is what I'm telling you. We talked about that. Hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him. Of course, being Moses. In a vision, and speaking to him in a dream. I'll talk to him. You do not have this right or this privilege to do this. And of course, then we could see Moses is my faithful servant. There in verse 7 goes on. And
So Moses is the one I'm going to talk to.
that's exactly it. And he made it known not only to Miriam and to Aaron, but to those who were there, the leaders. So it's pretty plain. So they pretty well understood. Well, I said 3 days while ago. 7 days. I'm sorry. 7 days she was a leper. And then we can see that she was cleansed of her leprosy, and after the people removed from pitched the tent toward pay ground. All righty. So here was those that speaking against Moses, and God said, I'm not having it. All right. Very good. What prophecy did Moses make? Deuteronomy 18, verse 15. Anybody know? Okay. Okay. What does John 1, verse 45 say? John 1, verse 45. Whoop. All right. So who's he talking to? About Christ, is he not? This is the prophet. This is the man that Moses spoke of. We talked about a little bit on Wednesday nights as far as the different prophecies that God had given to man. And whenever he makes these prophecies, if they come true, then they're truly from God. Well, here's one of them. This man, Moses, talking about Christ, he said, this thing or these things came about. It's true. No problem. Now, another thing that we can see in Acts 3, verse 22, for Moses truly said unto the fathers, a prophet shall the Lord your God raise up unto you of your brethren, like unto me. Him shall you hear in all things whatsoever he shall say unto you. Because about Christ. Then also in Acts 7, verse 37, also the same, basically the same thing, that he was a prophet of God. So there's no doubt that this prophecy concerning Christ came about. Now, again, we go back into Acts 3, verse 22 and 23, and did this prophecy, was it fulfilled? No doubt. No doubt. And we can also see, of course, like I said, in John 1:45 and several other verses that we could see these things came about. So this is speaking of Christ. And even though this is before the Ten Commandments even came about. So there's that prophecy. All right. Any questions? All right. Notice question 13. Did Moses enter the land of promise? No. And again, we can see that we go back to the book of Numbers. It contains a lot of the things that transpired during the wilderness wanderings. You go back into chapter 21 again that we talked a little bit about. The many battles that Israel had. And we can see that as they went from place to place, the people either fled or tried to fight against them, and God was the leader of Israel, and they were victorious each time because we can say God was on their side. Okay. Now, so why again did God not allow Moses into this land? Okay. All righty. Go back to Deuteronomy 32. Well, we can see that. And we can see that God had taken care of these things. He would never forget that God was in charge. You know, we forget that, do we not? We think, well, I can do it without anybody's help. No. We cannot even breathe one breath without God's help. If God were to take the blessings away, we'd die immediately. And we can see that even in Genesis, the second chapter, when God created man, God breathed the man the breath of life, and he became a living soul. What if he decides to take that away from us? We'd die. So we can see that Moses was given the responsibility of leading Israel, and we can see all the different problems even though he was had all these problems, he never lost faith in God. He never did he never did argue with God, as the expression is. Now he did on a number of occasions go before God and plead the case to keep God from destroying Israel. And on more than one occasion, God said, I'm just going to utterly destroy Israel because they will not listen. And Moses pleaded before God, and God allowed them to continue on. So is there any questions that we might have? We can see Moses was the meekest man, called meekest man there in chapter 12, I believe it was. Of all men, meekest. Now, meek, one thing, weak is another. He was meek, but he wasn't weak. Okay. Any questions? Good.
Everything that he had to deal with, he couldn't have been weak.
That's very true. Because every time he turns around, Israel is arguing and having a problem here with, well, we don't like this, we don't like that. And God taking care of the situation, and then it's still kind of like my dad used to say, they'd probably be upset if they hung them with the new rope. So this is the idea. So here is God, and he's taking care of things. And Moses was one of those that this is what's going to go. This is what God said. And that was it. Any questions? Good Lord willing, let's begin doing lesson number 2. Thank you very much for your kind attention.